The stagecoach rattled into Julesburg, Colorado on a blistering afternoon in July of 1878, carrying a woman who had learned to hold her secrets close and her head even closer to her chest. Delilah Kane pressed her gloved hand against the worn leather seat, steadying herself as the wheels bounced over the rutted Main Street, sending up clouds of dust that caught the sunlight like fragments of broken glass. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times during the long journey from the territorial prison in Wyoming. But now that it was here, the words she needed felt lodged somewhere between her heart and her throat. The town looked smaller than she remembered, or perhaps she had simply grown larger in her understanding of how cruel the world could be. 3 years behind bars had a way of changing a person's perspective on everything from the width of a street to the value of a single breath of free air. Delilah was 24 now, though she felt decades older, her youth having been stripped away one day at a time in that cold stone building where the sun barely reached through the narrow windows. She stepped down from the stagecoach with careful dignity, aware of the eyes that followed her movements. Small towns had long memories, and Julesburg was no exception. The driver handed down her single carpet bag without meeting her eyes, and she wondered if he knew, if somehow the mark of her imprisonment showed on her face like a brand. She had been convicted of theft, a crime she had committed out of desperation when her father lay dying, and she had no money for the medicine that might have saved him. It had not saved him anyway, and she had been left with nothing but guilt and a sentence that had stolen 3 years of her life. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Delilah stood on the wooden sidewalk, uncertain of where to go or what to do next. Her father's small house had been sold to pay his debts. She had no family left in Julesburg, no friends who had written to her during her time away. She was as alone as a person could be in this world, standing in the middle of a town that had once been home but now felt as foreign as the surface of the moon. "Miss Kane." The voice came from behind her, low and steady, with the kind of confidence that suggested its owner had never doubted his place in the world. Delilah turned slowly, her hand tightening on the handle of her carpetbag, and found herself looking up into the face of a man she vaguely recognized, but could not quite place. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his dusty work shirt and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were a striking pale blue, almost gray in the harsh light, and they studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away but somehow could not. "I am Delilah Kane," she said quietly, her voice rough from disuse. She had not spoken much during the journey, preferring silence to the curious questions of fellow passengers. "Owen Irwin," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I own the ranch about 5 miles west of town. Your father and I did business together before he passed. I was sorry to hear about his death." The mention of her father sent a sharp pang through Delilah's chest, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned in prison that showing emotion was dangerous, that tears and weakness only invited cruelty. "Thank you," she managed. "That is kind of you to say." Owen shifted his weight, and she noticed he held his hat in his hands now, turning it slowly as if searching for the right words. "I know you have just arrived, and I do not mean to be forward, but I heard you might be in need of work. My housekeeper left last month to live with her daughter in Denver, and I have been managing on my own, but the truth is I need help. The house is a mess, and I cannot cook worth a damn. If you are interested, the job is yours." Delilah stared at him, surprise momentarily breaking through her carefully maintained composure. "You are offering me employment, room and board included," Owen said. "Separate quarters, of course. Everything proper and respectable. The pay is $30 a month, and you would have Sundays off to do as you please. It was more than generous. It was a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman, and Delilah felt a suspicious tightness in her throat. "Mr. Irwin, I must tell you something before you make this offer. You should know the truth about where I have been." He waited, his blue eyes steady on her face, and she forced herself to continue, though shame burned through her like fire. "I spent time in prison," she confessed, the words barely more than a whisper. 3 years at the territorial prison in Wyoming. I was convicted of theft, and though I had my reasons, the law does not care about reasons. I am an ex-convict, Mr. Irwin, and if you knew that, I doubt you would want me in your home. The silence that followed felt eternal. Delilah braced herself for the rejection, for the disgust that would surely cross his face, for the withdrawal of the offer that had briefly kindled hope in her battered heart. But Owen simply nodded once, his expression unchanging. "Your sentence is served," he said firmly. "Welcome home." The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. Delilah felt her eyes sting with tears she could not allow herself to shed, and she blinked rapidly, turning her face slightly to the side. No one had welcomed her home. No one had said her sentence was served, that she had paid her debt and deserved a fresh start. The judge had not said it when he released her. The prison warden had not said it when she walked through those heavy doors for the last time. But this man, this near stranger, had spoken the words she had needed to hear more than she had realized. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "Say you will take the job," Owen replied. "My wagon is just down the street. I came into town for supplies, and I can take you back to the ranch now if you are willing." Delilah looked at him, really looked at him, trying to understand why he would do this. His face gave nothing away, but there was a kindness in his eyes that seemed genuine, and she realized she had no choice but to trust him. She had nowhere else to go, no other options presenting themselves on this dusty street in the harsh afternoon sun. "I will take the job," she said. "And I will work hard for you, Mr. Irwin. I promise you that." "I have no doubt," he said, and there was something in his tone that made her believe he meant it. "Call me Owen. We do not stand on formality out at the ranch." He led her down the street to where a sturdy wagon waited, loaded with sacks of flour and grain, coils of rope, and various other supplies. He helped her up onto the seat with a steady hand, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. The horses were fine animals, a matched pair of chestnuts with intelligent eyes, and they moved smoothly as Owen guided them out of town and onto the rutted road that led west. The landscape opened up around them, vast and beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. The prairie stretched to the horizon in every direction, broken only by the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking a creek bed, or the distant silhouette of the Rocky Mountains rising like ancient sentinels against the western sky. The grass was golden in the summer heat, and wildflowers dotted the roadside in splashes of purple and yellow. Delilah had forgotten how big the sky was out here, how it seemed to go on forever, making a person feel both infinitely small and strangely free at the same time. "You grew up here in Julesburg?" Owen asked after a while, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Yes," Delilah said. "My father was a clerk at the general store. We had a small house on the east side of town. It was not much, but it was ours." "I remember him," Owen said. "Good man. Honest. He sold me tools and hardware when I first started building up the ranch. This was about 5 years ago, shortly after I moved out here from Kansas. He always gave me fair prices and good advice." "He was a good man," Delilah agreed softly. "He deserved better than what life gave him." Owen glanced at her but did not press for details. They rode in silence for a while longer, and Delilah found herself relaxing slightly. the tension that had been coiled in her shoulders since she left the prison beginning to ease. There was something steady and reassuring about Owen's presence, something that made her feel, for the first time in 3 years, that she might actually be safe. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, partly because she was curious and partly because she wanted to fill the silence with something other than her own dark thoughts. "It is about 500 acres, Owen said. "I run cattle mostly, about 200 head right now, but I am hoping to expand next year if the prices hold. I have a good foreman, a man named Jack Sullivan, who has been with me from the start. There are 3 other hands who live in the bunkhouse, good men all of them. The house is nothing fancy, but it is solid. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms upstairs, kitchen and parlor downstairs. I built it myself with Jack's help, so it might not be as straight as a carpenter would make it, but it keeps the rain out and the wind mostly at bay." "It sounds lovely," Delilah said, and meant it. After 3 years in a cell barely large enough to turn around in, the idea of a house with 4 bedrooms seemed like unimaginable luxury. "It has been lonely," Owen admitted, and there was a rawness in his voice that surprised her. "I built the place thinking I would fill it with a family someday, but things do not always work out the way a man plans. I was engaged once back in Kansas, but she decided ranch life was not for her. She married a banker instead, and I came out here to start over." "I am sorry," Delilah said, because she could hear the old hurt in his words and recognized it as something similar to her own pain. "It was a long time ago," Owen said, shaking his head as if to clear away the memories. "I am over it now, or at least I tell myself I am. The ranch keeps me busy, and that is enough most days." They reached the ranch as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The house stood on a slight rise, just as Owen had described it, a sturdy 2-story structure built of wood and stone. It was not fancy, but it had a solid, welcoming look to it, and Delilah felt a flutter of something that might have been hope in her chest. Beyond the house, she could see the barn and several outbuildings, corrals with horses moving lazily in the heat, and in the distance, the dark shapes of cattle grazing on the prairie. Owen helped her down from the wagon and carried her carpet bag to the house. The interior was dim and cool after the brightness outside, and Delilah's eyes took a moment to adjust. The parlor was simply furnished with a few chairs and a sofa that had seen better days, but everything was clean if somewhat dusty. Owen led her through to the kitchen, which was large and functional, with a big wood stove and a long table that could seat 8 or more. "Your room is upstairs, last door on the right," Owen said, setting her bag down by the stairs. "It has its own window overlooking the east pasture, so you will get the morning sun. There are linens in the chest at the foot of the bed, and you can arrange things however you like. My room is downstairs, off the kitchen, so you will have the whole upstairs to yourself." "Thank you," Delilah said. "This is more than I expected, more than I deserve." Owen turned to face her, and his expression was serious. "You deserve a chance to start over just like anyone else. What you did in the past is done. What matters now is what you do going forward." His words settled into her heart like a balm on a wound, and Delilah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She climbed the stairs slowly, her carpetbag in hand, and found the room he had described. It was simple but pleasant, with a bed covered in a faded quilt, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a window that looked out over the rolling prairie. The evening light streamed through the glass, and Delilah stood there for a long moment, just breathing, just existing in this space that was hers, at least for now. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 dresses in the small wardrobe and placing her hairbrush, and the small Bible her father had given her on the dresser. Everything she owned in the world fit into that carpetbag with room to spare, but it did not matter. She was here, she was free, and she had work to do. Downstairs, she found Owen had already started preparing dinner, though his efforts were somewhat haphazard. He was attempting to fry bacon in a pan that was smoking heavily, and the smell of burning meat filled the kitchen. Delilah crossed the room quickly and took the pan from him without a word, moving it off the heat and scraping the ruined bacon into a bucket for the pigs. "Let me," she said quietly. "It is why you hired me, after all." Owen stepped back, looking somewhat embarrassed. "I told you I could not cook worth a damn." "You are not exaggerating," Delilah said, but there was the faintest hint of amusement in her voice. She had not felt anything close to amusement in such a long time that it surprised her. She examined the supplies in the kitchen and found flour, eggs, bacon, potatoes, and various other staples. Within half an hour she had produced a meal of fried potatoes, eggs, fresh biscuits, and bacon that was properly cooked, crisp but not burnt. They ate at the long kitchen table, and Delilah was surprised by how comfortable the silence between them was. Owen ate with the focused attention of a man who spent his days doing hard physical labor, and he complimented her cooking with genuine appreciation. After dinner, Delilah washed the dishes while Owen sat at the table going over accounts in a leather-bound ledger, and the domesticity of the scene struck her as both strange and comforting. "I want to establish some rules," Owen said as she was finishing with the dishes. "Or rather, some understandings between us." Delilah dried her hands on a towel and turned to face him, her guard immediately going back up. "Of course. First, you are an employee here, not a servant. I expect you to work hard, but I also expect you to speak up if I ask too much or if you need something. Second, the men who work here are good people, but if any of them make you uncomfortable or treat you with disrespect, you tell me immediately. Third, your past is your business. I do not need to know the details, and I will not allow anyone else to pry into them either. Is that clear?" "Yes," Delilah said, relief washing through her. "That is more than fair. Good. Now, I typically wake at dawn and expect breakfast shortly after. Lunch is at noon and dinner is around 6. The house needs regular cleaning, laundry once a week, and I would appreciate it if you could help me with mending when needed. Beyond that, you are free to spend your time as you see fit, as long as your duties are handled. Any questions?" "No," Delilah said. "I understand." "Then I will bid you good night," Owen said, standing and stretching. "Tomorrow will be a long day. I am sure you are tired from traveling." She was exhausted, bone-tired in a way that went beyond physical weariness, but she nodded and made her way upstairs to her room. She changed into her nightgown, which was worn thin from years of use, and climbed into the bed. The mattress was softer than anything she had slept on in 3 years, and the sheets smelled of lavender and sunshine. Delilah lay there in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling in for the night, the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of wood, the whisper of wind through the eaves. And for the first time since her father had died, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that Delilah found both comforting and healing. She woke before dawn to start the fire in the kitchen stove and prepare breakfast for Owen, and whatever ranch hands came up to the house. Most mornings it was just Owen and Jack Sullivan, the foreman, who was a gruff man in his 50s with a weathered face and kind eyes. Jack treated Delilah with the same respect he would show any woman, never asking questions about her past or making her feel like she was anything other than what she was, the housekeeper earning her keep. The work was hard but satisfying. Delilah cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing floors and washing windows until they gleamed. She did mountains of laundry, hauling water and heating it on the stove, scrubbing shirts and trousers on a washboard until her hands were red and raw. She mended torn clothing, darned socks, and sewed buttons back onto shirts. She cooked 3 meals a day, trying out new recipes when supplies allowed, and took pride in the fact that Owen always cleaned his plate and often asked for seconds. In the evenings, after dinner was cleaned up and her duties were done, Delilah would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the prairie. Sometimes Owen would join her, and they would talk about the ranch, about the cattle, about his plans for the future. He never asked about her past, true to his word, but she found herself wanting to tell him, wanting him to understand why she had done what she had done. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, she finally found the courage. They were sitting on the porch watching the sky turn from gold to purple, and the air was soft and warm with the promise of summer's end approaching. "My father was sick for 6 months before he died," Delilah said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Consumption. The doctor said he needed medicine, a specific kind that was expensive, very expensive. We did not have the money. I was working at the hotel in town, cleaning rooms, but it was not enough. I went to the bank for a loan, but they turned me down. I went to everyone I could think of, begging for help, but no one would lend money to a poor clerk's daughter with no collateral." Owen did not say anything, but she could feel his attention on her, patient and unwavering. "There was a man who stayed at the hotel," she continued. "He was a gambler, a card player from Denver, and he kept his winnings in a lockbox in his room. I had a master key because I cleaned all the rooms. I told myself I would just borrow it, that I would pay it back as soon as I could. I took $200, enough for the medicine and a little extra for food. But the man noticed the next day, and he went straight to the sheriff. They found the money in my room, still in the envelope I had hidden it in. I had not even spent it yet. Did the medicine help your father?" Owen asked, his voice gentle. "No," Delilah said, and the single word carried all the bitterness and grief she still felt. "He died 2 days after I was arrested. I was not even allowed to attend his funeral. They said I had forfeited that right when I became a criminal." "That is not right," Owen said, and there was anger in his voice, though she knew it was not directed at her. "You were trying to save your father's life. Any court should have taken that into consideration. The judge said the law is the law and sentiment does not change that," Delilah said. "He gave me 3 years, said I should be grateful it was not longer, and maybe he was right. Maybe I deserved every day of it." "No," Owen said firmly. "You did not deserve that. You made a desperate choice in a desperate situation. That does not make you a bad person. It makes you a daughter who loved her father enough to risk everything for him." His words broke something open inside her, some hard shell she had built around her heart to protect herself from more pain. Delilah felt tears spill down her cheeks, hot and fast, and she could not stop them. She covered her face with her hands, ashamed of her weakness, but Owen moved closer and gently pulled her hands away. "It is all right to cry," he said. "You have been through hell and you have every right to grieve, but you also have the right to move forward to build a new life. And I want you to know that you are safe here. Whatever you need, whatever I can do to help, you just have to ask." Delilah looked at him through her tears and saw only sincerity in his eyes. In that moment, something shifted between them, something deeper than employer and employee, something that felt like the first fragile threads of genuine connection. She did not have words for it, did not know how to name the feeling that was uncurling in her chest, warm and strange and terrifying in its intensity. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me as more than what I was forced to become." "I see a strong woman who has survived things that would have broken most people," Owen said. "I see someone with courage and determination, and I see someone I am very glad to have here on this ranch." They sat together as the last of the light faded from the sky, and the stars began to appear, countless and bright in the clear Colorado night. Delilah felt something inside her begin to heal, some deep wound that she had thought would never close beginning to mend. And it was because of this man who had offered her not just a job but a second chance at life. The summer passed into autumn, and the work on the ranch intensified as Owen and his men prepared for the cattle drive that would take the herd to market in Denver. Delilah watched the preparations with interest, learning about the business of ranching from the conversations she overheard and the questions she dared to ask. Owen was always willing to explain things to her, never making her feel foolish for not knowing, and she found herself fascinated by the complexities of running a successful ranch. She also found herself increasingly aware of Owen in ways that had nothing to do with his role as her employer. She noticed the way his shoulders moved under his shirt when he chopped wood, the way his hands, large and calloused from hard work, were nonetheless gentle when he handled a frightened calf or mended a broken bridle. She noticed how he always made sure she had everything she needed before he thought of himself, how he brought her wildflowers from the prairie on his way back from checking the cattle, how his eyes lit up when she made his favorite meal of pot roast and biscuits. Delilah tried to ignore these feelings, telling herself she was being foolish, that a man like Owen Irwin would never be interested in a woman with her past. But the feelings persisted, growing stronger with each passing day, until she could no longer deny that she was falling in love with him. Owen left for the cattle drive in mid-September, taking Jack and the other hands with him and leaving Delilah alone at the ranch. She had been worried about being by herself in such an isolated place, but Owen had left her with a rifle and careful instructions on how to use it, and he had made sure she knew how to handle the horses in case she needed to ride into town for help. "I will be back in 2 weeks," he had said as he prepared to leave. "Maybe 3 if we run into trouble. Will you be all right here alone?" "I will be fine," Delilah had assured him, though her heart had clenched at the thought of him being gone for so long. "I have plenty to keep me busy." He had hesitated then, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Delilah, I want you to know that you have become very important to me. This ranch has felt more like a home in the past few months than it has in all the years I have lived here, and that is because of you." "Owen," she had started, but he had held up a hand. "Let me finish. I know I am just your employer and I do not want to make you uncomfortable, but I needed to say that. You have made a difference here, a real difference, and I am grateful for that." Then he had ridden away, leaving her standing in the yard with her heart pounding and a confusion of feelings swirling inside her. She watched until he and the men disappeared over the rise, the dust from the cattle herd hanging in the air like a fading ghost, and then she had turned back to the empty house and tried to figure out what to do with herself. The days passed slowly without Owen. Delilah kept herself busy with deep cleaning, organizing the pantry, and working in the small vegetable garden that had been mostly neglected. She harvested the last of the tomatoes and beans, canned them for the winter, and felt a sense of pride in her accomplishment. She was building something here, creating a home, and the realization filled her with a fierce determination to make this place truly shine. In the evenings, she sat on the porch and watched the stars, thinking about Owen and wondering if he was looking at the same stars from wherever he had camped with the herd. She imagined him sitting by the fire, tired from a long day's ride, maybe thinking about her the way she was thinking about him. It was a dangerous line of thought, one that could lead only to disappointment, but she could not seem to stop herself. Owen returned on a crisp October morning, 17 days after he had left. Delilah saw the riders approaching from a long way off and felt her heart leap in her chest. She smoothed down her apron, tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, and told herself to stay calm, to not betray the depth of her feelings. But when Owen dismounted in the yard and turned to face her, his face breaking into a wide smile, all her careful composure fled. "I miss this place," he said, striding toward her. "But more than that, I missed you." "I missed you too," Delilah admitted, and the words felt both liberating and terrifying to say out loud. Owen stopped a few feet from her, his eyes searching her face. "The drive went well. We got a good price for the cattle, better than I expected. The ranch is secure for another year, maybe 2 if we are careful." "That is wonderful news," Delilah said, genuinely happy for him. "You must be exhausted. Come inside and I will make you something to eat." "In a minute," Owen said. "First, there is something I need to say, something I have been thinking about for the entire 2 weeks I was gone." Delilah's breath caught in her throat, but she did not speak, just waited. "I hired you because you needed work and I needed help," Owen said slowly, choosing his words with care. "But somewhere along the way, you became more than just my housekeeper. You became my friend, my confidante, the person I looked forward to seeing every morning and the last person I thought about every night. And I realized, riding back here, that I have fallen in love with you." The world seemed to stop spinning. Delilah stared at him, unable to process what she had just heard, unable to believe it was real. "I know I have no right to feel this way," Owen continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I know your past is your own, and I am not asking you to explain anything or justify anything. But I need you to know how I feel. I love you, Delilah Kane. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination to rebuild your life. I love the way you hum when you cook, the way you always make sure everyone else is taken care of before you think of yourself, the way you look at the sunset like it is a gift you have been given. And if there is any chance, any possibility that you might feel the same way about me, I would be the happiest man alive." Delilah felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were tears of joy, of relief, of a happiness so intense it was almost painful. "I do," she said, her voice shaking. "I do feel the same way. I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was impossible, but I cannot help it. I love you, Owen. I love you so much it frightens me." Owen closed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. Delilah melted against him, feeling the solid strength of his body, the steady beat of his heart, and knowing that she was finally, truly home. He kissed her then, slow and sweet and full of promise, and she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing of the past months. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Owen cupped her face in his hands and looked at her with such tenderness that she felt her heart might burst. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, I know we have only known each other a few months, but I do not want to waste any more time. Life is too short, and I have already spent too many years alone. Marry me, Delilah, and let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," Delilah said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." Jack Sullivan, who had been diplomatically tending to his horse on the other side of the yard, let out a whoop of approval, and Delilah laughed, the sound bright and free. Owen swept her up in his arms and spun her around, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Delilah allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future filled with love and happiness. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Julesburg. Delilah wore a dress of pale blue that Owen had bought for her from the best shop in Denver, and she carried a bouquet of the last wildflowers of the season that Owen had picked that morning. Jack Sullivan stood as Owen's best man, and the pastor's wife stood up with Delilah, both of them beaming with approval. The townspeople of Julesburg had mixed reactions to the news of the wedding. Some were happy for Owen and curious about his new bride, while others whispered behind their hands about Delilah's time in prison. But Owen made it clear that anyone who had a problem with his wife's past was not welcome on his property, and most people had enough respect for him to keep their opinions to themselves. After the ceremony, they returned to the ranch for a small celebration with Jack and the other hands. Delilah had prepared a feast, and they ate and drank and laughed late into the evening. When the guests finally left, Owen carried Delilah across the threshold of the house that was now truly their home, and they spent their first night as husband and wife in the room that Owen had moved upstairs to share with her. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, a revelation for Delilah, who had never known such intimacy or felt so cherished. Owen was gentle with her, patient and caring, making sure she felt safe and loved every moment. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight that streamed through the window, and Delilah felt a completeness she had never known before. "I never thought I would have this," she whispered against his chest. "A home, a husband, a future. I thought my life was over when they sent me to prison." "Your life is just beginning," Owen said, kissing her forehead. "Our life is just beginning. And I promise you, Delilah, I will spend every day proving to you that you are worthy of love, of happiness, of everything good this world has to offer." "You already have," she said, and it was the simple truth. The winter that followed was harsh, with bitter cold and heavy snows that sometimes lasted for days. But inside the ranch house, Delilah and Owen created a warm, loving sanctuary. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or simply talking about everything and nothing. Owen taught Delilah how to play chess, and she taught him how to knit, though his fingers were too large and clumsy to do more than basic stitches. They laughed together, worked together, and loved each other with an intensity that only deepened as time passed. In the spring, as the snow melted and the prairie turned green again, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She told Owen one morning over breakfast, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. His eyes widened, and then a grin spread across his face so wide and joyful that she knew everything was going to be all right. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Delilah asked, though she could see that he was. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Owen said, coming around the table to kneel beside her chair. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach and looked up at her with wonder. "You have given me so much already, and now this. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Delilah bloomed with it. Her body filled out, losing the gauntness that prison had left her with, and her face took on a glow that Owen said made her even more beautiful. He fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and work less, bringing her treats from town and making sure she had everything she needed. Their son was born on a cold January night in 1880, during a blizzard that made it impossible to fetch the doctor from town. Delilah labored through the night with only Owen and Jack's wife, Emma, who had come to help when she heard the baby was coming. It was long and painful and frightening, but when Delilah finally held her son in her arms, all the pain was forgotten. "He is perfect," Owen said, his voice choked with emotion as he looked at the tiny red-faced baby. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas Michael Irwin, after Owen's father and Delilah's father respectively, and he became the center of their world. Owen was a devoted father, taking turns walking the floor with Thomas when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just staring at his son with an expression of complete adoration. Delilah discovered depths of love she had not known existed, a fierce protectiveness and tenderness that made her understand why her own father had been willing to fight so hard to survive. She sang to Thomas, told him stories, and watched him grow with a mixture of joy and bittersweet awareness of how quickly time passed. The years flowed by like water, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. The ranch prospered under Owen's careful management, and they were able to expand the herd and improve the property. They built a new barn, fenced more pasture, and hired additional hands to help with the work. Delilah became known throughout the area as an excellent cook and a gracious hostess, and the ranch house was often filled with guests and laughter. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was curious about everything, always asking questions and exploring the ranch with fearless enthusiasm. Owen taught him to ride almost as soon as he could walk, and Delilah often looked out the window to see father and son heading out across the prairie together. Thomas perched in front of Owen on the saddle, both of them grinning with pure joy. When Thomas was 3, Delilah gave birth to twin daughters, whom they named Margaret Rose and Elizabeth Ann. The twins were identical, with golden hair and green eyes that came from Owen's mother, and they kept Delilah and Owen running from morning to night. The house was chaos and noise and constant activity, and Delilah loved every overwhelming minute of it. On their 5th anniversary, Owen surprised Delilah with a trip to Denver. They left the children with Emma Sullivan and took the train, staying in a fine hotel and dining in restaurants Delilah had only dreamed about. Owen bought her a new dress and a beautiful necklace, and they attended the theater, seeing a production of Shakespeare that left Delilah breathless with its beauty. On their last night in the city, as they walked along the gaslit streets, Owen took her hand and looked at her seriously. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying me, living on the ranch, all of this." Delilah stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "How could you even ask me that? You gave me back my life, Owen. You gave me a home, a family, a future I never thought I would have. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I did not think that was possible. I just want to make sure you are happy," Owen said. "I know ranch life is hard, especially with 3 young children. I know it is not always what you dreamed of." "It is better than any dream," Delilah said firmly, "because it is real and it is ours. Every moment of hardship, every sleepless night, every challenge we have faced has been worth it because we faced it together. You are my home, Owen Irwin, and wherever you are is where I want to be." He kissed her there on the street, not caring who saw, and Delilah kissed him back with all the passion and love she felt. They returned to the ranch the next day, and life resumed its busy, beautiful rhythm. The years continued to pass. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning the business of ranching from his father and showing a natural aptitude for working with cattle and horses. The twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief with alarming regularity. When Thomas was 8 and the twins were 5, Delilah gave birth to another son, whom they named Samuel James. Sam was a quiet, thoughtful child, content to sit and watch the world around him with solemn eyes, and he quickly became everyone's favorite because of his sweet nature. The ranch continued to thrive. Owen had proved himself to be an excellent businessman, making smart decisions about breeding stock and grazing land. They purchased an additional 200 acres and built a larger barn to accommodate the growing herd. Owen hired more men, creating jobs for people in the area, and he gained a reputation as a fair and generous employer. Delilah became involved in the Julesburg community, despite the lingering whispers about her past. She helped organize fundraisers for the church, taught Sunday school, and became friends with many of the other ranch wives in the area. Slowly, her past ceased to matter to most people. She was simply Owen Irwin's wife, a respected member of the community, and a woman who had proven herself through years of hard work and kindness. One autumn day, when Delilah was 35 and they had been married for 11 years, a stranger arrived at the ranch. He was an older man, well-dressed and obviously from the city, and he asked to speak with Delilah privately. Owen was immediately suspicious, but Delilah agreed to meet with the man in the parlor while Owen hovered protectively nearby. "Mrs. Irwin," the man said, removing his hat. "My name is Richard Ashford. I am an attorney from Denver, and I have been searching for you for quite some time." "Why?" Delilah asked warily, her mind immediately going to her time in prison, wondering if somehow the past had come back to haunt her. "I represent the estate of a man named Charles Westbrook," Ashford said. "He was the gambler from whom you stole money many years ago, the incident that led to your imprisonment." Delilah's blood ran cold. "I see. What does Mr. Westbrook want with me now?" "I have nothing to give him if he seeks restitution." "Mr. Westbrook died 6 months ago," Ashford said gently. "Before he passed, he made a deathbed confession of sorts. He told me that what happened with you had haunted him all these years, that he had come to realize the money meant nothing compared to the damage his accusation had done to your life. He learned after your trial that you had taken the money to buy medicine for your dying father, and he was consumed with guilt." Delilah stared at him, unable to speak. "Mr. Westbrook was a complicated man," Ashford continued. "He won and lost fortunes at the card tables, but in the end, he accumulated considerable wealth through investments. He never married, had no children, and when he knew he was dying, he instructed me to find you and give you this." He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to Delilah. Her hands shook as she opened it and found a bank draft for $10,000 and a letter written in a shaky hand. The letter read, "Dear Miss Kane, I do not expect you to forgive me for what I did to you. I was angry about the theft and did not stop to consider your circumstances or your reasons. I learned too late that you were trying to save your father's life, and that my insistence on prosecution cost you 3 years of your freedom. I have lived with that guilt ever since. This money cannot undo the harm I caused, but it is my attempt to make some small amends. I hope you have found happiness despite what I took from you. Signed, Charles Westbrook." Delilah read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Owen crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her, and she leaned into his strength. "He is dead," she said numbly. "The man whose money I took is dead, and he felt guilty about what happened to me." "Do you accept this?" Owen asked, gesturing to the bank draft. "It is your decision, Delilah. Whatever you want to do, I will support you." Delilah looked at the check, at the amount that would have seemed like a fortune to the desperate girl she had been, but now seemed almost meaningless compared to what she had built with Owen. But she thought about her children, about their futures, about the opportunities this money could provide. "I accept it," she said to the attorney. "Not for myself, but for my children. This money will go toward their education, their futures." "That seems like the right way to honor what Mr. Westbrook was trying to do." Ashford nodded approvingly. "A wise decision, Mrs. Irwin. I will make arrangements for the funds to be transferred to your bank here in Julesburg. Mr. Westbrook would be pleased to know it will benefit the next generation." After the attorney left, Delilah sat in Owen's arms for a long time, processing everything that had happened. "It is strange," she said finally. All these years I thought of him as the villain in my story, the man who destroyed my life. But he was just a person, flawed and human like everyone else, and in the end he tried to make it right. People are complicated, Owen agreed. And it takes courage to admit when you are wrong, even if it comes late. What matters is that you survived, that you built a beautiful life from the ashes of that terrible time. You did that, Delilah. You and your strength and your refusal to give up. I did not do it alone, Delilah said, looking up at him. I could not have done any of this without you. You saved me, Owen. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, Owen said, kissing her forehead. I was just existing before you came into my life, going through the motions but not really living. You taught me what it means to love, to really love another person with everything you have. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning grateful for another day. So no, you did not do it alone because we did it together, and we will keep doing it together for all the years we have left. The money from Charles Westbrook's estate was invested wisely, set aside for the children's education and futures. Thomas eventually attended agricultural college in Fort Collins, learning modern ranching techniques that he brought back to implement on the family ranch. Margaret became a teacher, opening a small school in Julesburg that served the children of ranch families in the area. Elizabeth married a young lawyer from Denver and moved to the city, though she visited often with her own growing family. Sam followed his father into ranching, showing the same careful attention to detail and love for the land that Owen had always demonstrated. As the years passed and Delilah and Owen grew older, their love only deepened. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal losses, including the death of Jack Sullivan, who had become like family to them. Through it all, they remained each other's constant, the center around which their world revolved. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a grand party at the ranch, inviting everyone they had ever known. The house and yard were filled with people, with laughter and music and dancing. Delilah wore a new dress of deep blue, and Owen wore his best suit, and they danced together under strings of lanterns as the sun set over the prairie. 25 years, Owen said as they swayed to the music. It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. The best 25 years of my life, Delilah said. I would not change a single moment, not even the hard ones, because they all led us here. Do you remember that first day, when you stepped off that stagecoach looking so scared and alone? Owen asked. I took one look at you and knew my life was about to change. I did not know how or why, but I knew. I remember thinking you were either crazy or the kindest man I had ever met, Delilah said with a smile. Offering a job to an ex-convict without hesitation, telling me my sentence was served. Those words changed everything for me, Owen. They gave me permission to start over, to believe I deserved a second chance. You deserved it and so much more, Owen said. And I got to be the lucky man who got to spend his life with you. That is the real gift in all of this. As they danced, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and friends, Delilah felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. The scared, broken girl who had arrived in Julesburg all those years ago was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth, who had built a life of meaning and love from nothing but determination and hope. She had been given a second chance, and she had made the most of it, creating something beautiful and lasting. The party continued late into the night, but eventually the guests departed and the family cleaned up. Delilah and Owen walked out to the porch, their customary evening ritual, and sat together watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. The prairie stretched out before them, silvered by moonlight, and the sound of cattle lowing in the distance was a familiar, comforting soundtrack. "I hope we have many more years together," Delilah said quietly. "I cannot imagine my life without you in it." "We will have as many as God grants us," Owen said, taking her hand, "and I will treasure every single day. You are my heart, Delilah. You always have been. From that first moment I saw you standing on that street corner looking lost. And you always will be, for whatever time we have left and beyond." They sat together in the comfortable silence of two people who had shared a lifetime, who knew each other's thoughts and feelings without words. The future stretched before them, uncertain as all futures are, but they faced it together, just as they had faced everything else. Years later, when Delilah was 52 and Owen was 57, they welcomed their first great-grandchild, a daughter born to Thomas and his wife. Delilah held the tiny baby in her arms and marveled at the circle of life, at how far she had come from that desperate girl who had made one terrible mistake. This child would grow up in a world made better by the choices Delilah and Owen had made, by the love they had built and the legacy they were leaving. Owen stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, and they looked down at the sleeping infant together. "She is beautiful," Owen said softly. "Just like her great-grandmother." "I never imagined this," Delilah said, her voice thick with emotion. "When I was sitting in that prison cell, I never imagined I would have any of this. A husband who loves me, children and grandchildren, a home, respect in the community. I thought my life was over, but it was just beginning." "It was always meant to be this way," Owen said. "We were always meant to find each other, to build this life together. I believe that with everything in me." "So do I," Delilah agreed, leaning against him and feeling the solid strength that had been her anchor for so many years. "So do I." As the seasons continued their endless cycle and the years flowed past, Delilah and Owen remained devoted to each other and to the life they had created. They celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, welcomed new grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and watched their family grow and thrive. The ranch passed to Thomas and Sam, who ran it together with the same dedication and love their father had shown, and it continued to prosper under their care. When Delilah was 63, Owen suffered a fall from his horse while out checking cattle. He broke his leg badly, and the doctor warned that he would need months to recover fully. Delilah nursed him with the same fierce devotion he had always shown her, sitting by his bed, reading to him, making sure he followed the doctor's orders even when he chafed at the forced inactivity. "You are a tyrant," Owen complained good-naturedly one afternoon, as Delilah refused to let him get up and walk around against doctor's orders. "I am keeping you alive," Delilah corrected, fluffing his pillows with perhaps more force than necessary. "You will thank me when you are able to walk again without a limp." "I thank you every day," Owen said, his tone turning serious. "For everything, Delilah. For loving me, for building this life with me, for giving me more happiness than any one man deserves." "We both deserved happiness," Delilah said, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking his hand. "And we found it together. That is all that matters." Owen recovered fully, though he moved a bit slower than before, and was more willing to let his sons handle the more physically demanding aspects of ranch work. He and Delilah spent more time together, taking long walks when the weather was good, sitting on the porch in the evenings, and simply enjoying the peace that came from a life well lived. On their 40th anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch once again, 3 generations coming together to celebrate the love that had started everything. Delilah looked around at the faces of her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. All of this had sprung from that moment when a kind cowboy had offered a desperate woman a second chance, when he had said the words that changed her life. "Your sentence is served. Welcome home." "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, finding her standing alone in the kitchen during the party. "Everything," Delilah said. "How far we have come, how much we have built, how blessed we are. I was just thinking about that first day when you offered me the job and I told you about my past. Do you remember what you said to me?" "I said your sentence was served and welcomed you home," Owen said. "And I meant every word. You were home from that moment, Delilah. You just did not know it yet." "I know it now," she said, moving into his arms. "I have known it for 40 years. You are my home, Owen Irwin. You always have been, and you always will be." They held each other in the kitchen while the party continued around them, two people who had found in each other everything they had ever needed or wanted. The road had been long and sometimes hard, but they had walked it together, and that had made all the difference. As they grew older still, into their 70s, Delilah and Owen settled into a comfortable rhythm. They spent their days in quiet companionship, working in the garden, raiding and welcoming the steady stream of family members who visited. The ranch remained in the family, a living legacy of everything they had built together, and it thrived under the care of the younger generation. One spring evening, when Delilah was 76 and Owen was 81, they sat on their beloved porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold. The air was soft and warm, carrying the scent of new grass and wildflowers, and the world seemed at peace. "It has been a good life," Owen said, his voice still strong despite his years. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "The very best life," Delilah agreed, her hand clasped in his. "I would not change a single thing." "Not even the hard parts?" Owen asked with a small smile. "Not even those," Delilah said firmly, "because they brought me here to you, to this moment. Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of pain was worth it for the joy we have shared." "I love you," Owen said simply. "I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you until the end and beyond." "And I love you," Delilah replied. "More than words can ever express. You saved my life, Owen. You gave me hope when I had none, a home when I was lost, and a love that has sustained me through everything. You are the best man I have ever known, and I am grateful every single day that you chose me." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the stars began to appear, two souls who had found in each other their perfect complement. The prairie stretched out before them in the gathering darkness, vast and beautiful, and the sound of their family inside the house was a gentle, comforting backdrop. In the years that followed, they continued to live each day as a gift, cherishing their time together and the family they had created. Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87, with Delilah beside him, holding his hand. His death was a profound loss, but Delilah took comfort in knowing they had been granted many years together, far more than many couples received, and that every one of those years had been filled with love. Delilah lived for 5 more years after Owen's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, who cared for her with the same devotion she had always shown them. She spent her final years in the ranch house. She had first entered as a desperate, frightened woman, and had transformed into a home filled with love and laughter. She told her grandchildren stories of their grandfather, of how he had given her a second chance, and shown her that love could heal even the deepest wounds. When Delilah died at the age of 84, she was buried beside Owen in the small cemetery overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree that had grown from a sapling they had planted together on their 10th anniversary. Her headstone bore a simple inscription: "Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, she was welcomed home and found love. The ranch continued in the family for generations, a testament to the love and hard work of Delilah and Owen Irwin. Their story was passed down through the years, becoming part of the family's history, a reminder that everyone deserves a second chance, that love can conquer even the darkest past, and that home is not a place, but the people who welcome you with open hearts. The small town of Julesburg, Colorado, where it all began, continued to grow and change, but the Irwin Ranch remained a constant, a piece of living history where love had triumphed over adversity. And on quiet spring evenings, when the wind whispered through the prairie grass and the stars shone bright overhead, it was easy to imagine two souls sitting on that old porch, hand in hand, watching the sunset together for all eternity, exactly as they had in life, complete, content, and forever home.